Well, good morning, everyone. How are you doing this morning? Good, good. If you haven't noticed, kids, if you're second grade or younger, you are free to head out to children's ministry. So again, just a plug for volunteers for children's ministry. We really want to be able to offer through fifth grade. So if you're interested, please let us know. We definitely want to make that. So my name's Dave Ovell. I get the privilege of serving as lead pastor here at Hillside, and I am so thankful to see all of you here. It feels like winter has decided to show up after all. It's a little cold out there, a little drizzly. So if you didn't get your Christmas lights up yet, shame on you. You should. No. I'm glad we got ours up before all this cold weather hit. But yeah, so just, I know we've mentioned it already, but just to reiterate, if there are technical issues that happen, we got, COVID's going around. Well, our computer decided it wanted to get a virus as well. And so it is currently at the doctor getting fixed. So we are working as best as we can. And I think our tech team's doing a stellar job of getting us through so far. So thanks to them for that. So yeah, it is second week of Advent, which means, if you're looking at the candles, right, we're halfway there. So for Christmas, this time of year can mean something as well as, oh my goodness, it's almost Christmas. I still have 30,000 people to buy for. If you're one of those people that send out Christmas cards, you're like, oh, I need a Christmas card, which means I need a Christmas picture, which, am I a write a letter kind of Christmas card person? Do I have my list up to date, my address list, all those wonderful things? You've got Christmas parties you need to go to, Christmas gifts to buy, Christmas gifts to wrap, all that fun stuff. And it can be a chaotic time and almost take away from the way Christmas used to feel when you were a kid. Right? Remember that when you were a kid and Christmas was just like joy, fun, food, candy, all the time. And then you become an adult and you're like, oh my goodness, someone has to plan all that joy and fun. And I guess that's me now. And it takes on a different meaning and it gets chaotic. But something that can cause chaos in a house more than even Christmas is a pregnancy. Right? If you have kids, you know what I'm talking about, especially that first one. I remember when Amy and I found out that she was pregnant with Haley, our oldest. The emotions you go through. It's are you pregnant? I wonder if you're pregnant. You're pregnant? Oh, you're pregnant. Oh, you're pregnant. Oh, my goodness. Like with a real human being. And now we're responsible for that human being. And then all of a sudden you just start going, okay, so now who are we going to tell? When are we going to tell? Like, who are we going to tell individually? Who are we going to let find out by the grapevine? Wait, now who's going to get mad if they find out by the grapevine? So now we have to tell them in person, right? And then it's like, are we going to find out if it's a boy and girl or a girl before? Or are we going to wait until when they're born? Oh, we need a room for this person to live. Okay, we should get that. Oh, we probably need some other things. What do we need? Oh, we should register. How do you register? Where do you register? And just all this chaos starts to go, and you're like, oh my goodness, yes, I'm happy, but I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed all at the same time, right? So chaos can happen due to a pregnancy. Well, we're heading into Christmas, and there's a very famous pregnancy that takes place that we celebrate around this time. And I want to talk about that, but I want to talk about actually two pregnancies, and Elizabeth and Mary. Now, if you read Luke chapter 1 and chapter 2, you're going to hear about more than just Mary's pregnancy. You're going to hear about this lady called Elizabeth. And so what I want to do today is I want to look at both of their pregnancies because they happen around the same time. In fact, Elizabeth is about 6 months pregnant before Mary becomes pregnant. Okay, so they're right around the same time. But they have two kind of unique different stories about them as well. But for some reason, Luke finds it very important to put these two together and to let us know that these events take place at the same time. And so I want to explore those, take a look at them, and what is it that we can learn from these stories as well. So you've got Elizabeth and Mary. All right, technical. I'm going to try to go on more, maybe. There we go. So let me do some background for you. Zechariah and Elizabeth. Okay, so this is the first pregnancy. Zechariah is a priest, and he's getting up in years. Okay, he's not a spring chicken anymore. He's getting up in age, and he and Elizabeth do not have children at this time. And he and Elizabeth desperately want children. And so he continues to pray for children. Well, it's his time to go into the temple and light incense. And so he goes into the temple. He goes up to, if you're familiar with the temple at all, there's different chambers or different sections to that. He gets up to where the altar is, and there's a curtain that separates the altar from the Holy of Holies. So he's basically as deep in as you can get, unless you're the one chosen to go into the Holy of Holies one time a year. That's it. That's all people get in there. So he's right there, and he's lighting the incense, and an angel appears to him, which I just once would love to watch that experience sometime. Can you imagine you're just sitting there lighting, like you're lighting an Advent candle, and all of a sudden an angel appears on the other side? Like, that would freak me out just a little bit, right? So an angel appears to Zechariah and says, this is Ovell paraphrasing, by the way, hey, good news, your prayers have been heard, you're going to have a kid, and it's going to be a son, and you're going to name him John. And he tells him about all this stuff that this son John is going to do. Now, if you don't know yet, his son is John the Baptist, okay? So a kind of an important, famous person, right? So he's told, you're going to have a son. His reaction isn't like, woohoo, yay! His reaction is, how do I know this is actually going to happen? After all, I'm old, and my wife is up in years as well. Now, it actually says that in the Bible, which tells me Zechariah, he's a smart man. Because he didn't say, I'm old and so is my wife, right? Because that might have gotten out. It's, I'm old and, well, she's up in years, right? And so the angel, Gabriel, says, well, again, Ovell paraphrase, I'm a messenger from God, so it's going to happen. You shouldn't argue or wonder. But he tells them, because you doubted, you're not going to be able to speak until the child is born and he's named. So he comes out, people are out there waiting, and it took him longer than normal, right? Instead of just lighting the incense and doing whatever he had to do and then leave, he's having a conversation with an angel. So it took a little longer. They're like, what's going on? And he can't talk. He's trying to express to them what's going on. He finally gets home. He writes down or whatever, lets Elizabeth know, hey, you're going to be pregnant. You're going to have a boy. We're going to name him John. And she is elated. She's like, oh, this is amazing. We've been praying for this. And she feels some justification and some redemption because she's like, why can't I get pregnant? I want to be pregnant. And now in her old age, she gets to be pregnant. Now, moving on to Joseph and Mary. Backstory to them. Now, some of us might know more of this backstory. But again, let's just run through it real quick. So Mary is doing her thing, and Gabriel, same angel, appears to Mary. And it's about 6 months after he's appeared to Zechariah, right? And so he appears to Mary and says, again, Ovell paraphrase, hey, how's it going? Don't be scared. Got some good news for you. You are definitely going to be blessed. And he tells her, hey, you're going to have a baby, and you're going to name him Jesus, and talks about he's going to sit on David's throne forever, and basically giving her the ideas and the knowledge of this is going to be the Messiah. Now, her reaction is, okay, how's this going to happen because I'm still a virgin, right? Now, he doesn't give the same response that he gave to Zechariah because she wasn't necessarily going, how do I know for sure this is going to happen? Because, see, remember, Zechariah's been praying for this, right? And then an angel comes and God's messenger and says, hey, your prayer's been heard. It's going to be answered. And Zechariah's like, what? What are you talking about? It's like, you've been praying about this. Why are you so shocked that? But, side note, how many times have you prayed for something and when you get an answer, you're like, what? How did that happen? Well, you've been praying for it. All right? Let's not bother going back to James where you're not supposed to be double-minded. If you ask for it, you're going to get it, right? So anyway, side note. So Mary says, how's this going to happen? He explains the Holy Spirit's going to come upon you. And her response then is basically, whatever God wants, I'm his servant, let it be done. Now, Joseph hears the news, and he's betrothed to Mary. Now, here in America, we have no concept of what that actually is. We don't have that stage, right? So it's beyond engaged, because if you're engaged, you can break off that engagement, and that's it. You don't have to get a divorce. If you're betrothed, it's beyond engagement. You're not quite married, but it's past that. And if you break off that relationship, you actually need a divorce to break off that relationship. Okay, so it's past engagement, not quite married. So he gets the word, and his response is, I'll divorce her quietly. Because if he divorced her publicly, that could end up meaning that Mary could get stoned. Because here's the deal. People are finding out this girl's pregnant. She's betrothed to this guy. So something happened there. Joseph knows that's not my kid. And so he says, okay, I still care for her, so I'm going to divorce her quietly so that she won't have all that shame and won't risk being stoned. Angel comes to Joseph in a dream and says, hey, what Mary is telling you is true. This is God's kid. You're to name him Jesus. Stick with her. And so he does, right? So here are two completely different stories about pregnancy around the same time. So what can we learn from them? Where can we go? Well, I want to take one more step and start going into the birth. And so here we go. This is how the birth of John the Baptist takes place. So Luke chapter 1, verses 57 through 66. When it was time for Elizabeth to have her baby, she gave birth to a son. No surprise there. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown her great mercy, and they shared her joy. On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to name him after his father, Zechariah. But his mother spoke up and said, no, he's to be called John. They said to her, there is no one among your relatives who has that name. Then they made signs to his father to find out what he would like to name the child. He asked for a writing tablet, and to everyone's astonishment, he wrote, his name is John. Immediately his mouth was open and his tongue set free, and he began to speak, praising God. All the neighbors were filled with awe, and throughout the hill country of Judea, people were talking about all these things. Everyone who heard this wondered about it, asking, what then is this child going to be? For the Lord's hand was with him. Now, so, not trying to be disrespectful, but to kind of put it in today's imagery, an old lady in your neighborhood just had a baby, right? Word's going to get through, especially nowadays. I mean, with Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. I don't know if Pinterest would care about that. But, right? So word is going to spread. Family are showing up. Elizabeth is probably at her house, comforted by people around her that she knows, that she loves, that she's cared for. And everyone is like, man, they are amazing people, that God would bless them in such a way. What in the world did they do to receive such an amazing blessing from God? And what is going to, this kid must be so special. That's kind of the reaction around them. All joy, warm fuzzies, great things. Okay, so let's move on to Mary and Joseph. In those days, we just read this passage, in those days Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. And this was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. A little bit different scenario. She's not home. She's not surrounded by neighbors and family. Neighbors and family aren't talking about, yay, wow, what a great thing. Right? If you're a mom or even a dad, can you imagine taking especially your firstborn and putting them in a feeding trough for their bed? I remember with Haley, I was like, oh, you're so cute and lovely and fragile, and I don't want to break you, right? I want to hug you, but I'm like, I don't want to squish you. And it's like, okay, I got your head supported. How do I lay you down and keep your head supported all at the same time? Somehow I got to move that hand, and, you're like panic mode. And here she is, her firstborn is like, feeding trough. Hey, look, animals, this is just how I pictured this. Right? It's just so different. So let's kind of do a comparison between Elizabeth and Mary. So Elizabeth's pregnancy, joy and a sense of redemption for Elizabeth. She's just astonished, and she's like, yes. Read in Luke, she actually feels redeemed from this pregnancy. Like, yes, I deserve that. It's about time. Mary's pregnancy, confused and troubled. I mean, how could you not be in her situation? Next, Elizabeth celebrated by family and neighbors. Everyone was like, have you heard about Elizabeth? Oh my goodness, this is amazing. This is fantastic. Mary, on the other hand, probably went more like, hey, did you hear about Mary? Yeah, that's amazing. Right? Totally different scenario, totally different attitude. Next, Elizabeth, her pregnancy seen as a tremendous blessing. Mary, seen as a result of sinful behavior. I mean, to the average person, they're like, oh, yeah. I mean, she's claiming it's God, right? Oh, come on. But everyone knows it must be Joseph. He's sticking with her, right? So they're going about the same path, kind of. The birth of John the Baptist. Birth celebrated with friends and neighbors. Mary celebrated with strangers. And heaven. Right? So if you remember, and we'll talk about it a little bit more next week about the strangers. Can you imagine, again, your first child, you just feel guilty because you just placed your first child in a feeding trough, and next thing you know, these strangers, shepherds, all start gathering around, and you're like, who are you? And they're like, hey, we want to see your baby. We heard about him. It's like, no. Right? You'll be like, but heaven celebrated as well. So, both miraculous pregnancies. Both amazing. But how people responded to them is rather different. Now, we know the rest of the story, so for some of us, it's hard to really picture what Mary would have been going through. We get kind of the cleaned up version even in the Bible. But I can't imagine, especially in that time of history, the looks she would have gotten, the whispers she would have heard. I mean, the actual talk of, you know what, she deserves to be stoned. That's what she went through. While Elizabeth got to go through celebration, joy, and happiness. The crazy thing is, neither one of them is more righteous than the other. They were both just following God's will for their lives. And yet, their pregnancies that God was very instrumental to be a part of, took on a completely different feel. Obedience does not guarantee comfort. Settle in just a little bit. Obedience does not guarantee comfort. Oh man, I think so many times, especially in Western Christianity, we think, oh man, if I am just obedient, if I just do what God desires me to do, man, you know what? Then my life is going to become so much easier. It's going to be just a bed of roses. It's going to be fantastic. And our motivation can almost become obedience for comfort rather than obedience for obedience sake. It's, God, I want to obey you so you will bless me. It's kind of, we think it's a give and take. But obedience does not guarantee that it's going to be a comfortable ride. Just ask Mary. Just ask Paul, who spent a lot of time in jail for being obedient. Just ask Stephen, who was stoned because he was being obedient. But boy, sometimes we can think, if I just try a little harder, my life will get a little bit better. Or we think, oh man, my life, there's something off. I must be doing something wrong. God must be angry with me as well. And that's not necessarily the case either. We need to have faith that God is with us no matter the circumstances. We need to have faith that God is with us no matter the circumstances. No matter what, no matter if things are going well or if they're not. If they're not going according to how we plan, that doesn't mean God is not with us. But again, I think we can get caught in that trap that things have to go well if I'm in a proper relationship with God. And even worse yet, boy, sometimes I think we can also look at other people and we try to gauge their spiritual walk by how life is working out for them. And we see someone that's struggling, we're like, well, you know, if you just be obedient, this wouldn't be happening. Or life seems to be going so well, we think, oh man, you know what? I see them at church all the time. They are just rocking it spiritually. And we have no idea that they are struggling, that they are in a dark place spiritually. But we look on the outside and we think, oh, everything's going smooth, so everything must be fine. So what is it that we can learn from this story, from these accounts of two different pregnancies? I think for some of us, our next step is to realize, man, if you are following God because you think it's going to make life more comfortable, we need to reevaluate. Because if that's your attitude, the first time something comes up that creates a struggle, to doubt God, and you start to doubt his presence. I think also it helps us to, if we take a look at these stories, these accounts, and we really try to put ourselves in the actual history. Forget that we know the whole story. Which group would we be a part of? Would we be the, man, God's doing amazing things? More towards the Elizabeth side? Or would we be doubting and pointing fingers and whispering? I mean, the fact of the matter is, I don't know your heart. You don't know mine. So for us to try to gauge from the outside what's happening inside is a mistake. And so maybe what we need to do, maybe, support, encourage, pray, We don't need to be the judges. We don't need to be the spiritual thermometer going around going, oh, cold, cold. Oh, man, I'm fired, go. That's not our role. We take care of ourselves, and we rejoice with others when it's time to rejoice with them, and they say, oh man, things are going great, and we mourn and cry and support those who are going through a tough time. As I read through this, I just couldn't help but notice the difference. And I just kept coming back to, but God, they were both so obedient. They were both so willing. Why would you put Mary through what you put her through? She's carrying Jesus. Why? And, you know, the pastor in me wanted to come up with some great deep kind of, here it is. But this is really what I came up with each time. You don't have to know, Dave. I'm God. You're not. You don't have to know. All you have to do is follow me as faithfully as those two did. Follow that example. And so I want to encourage you, as we continue to interact with each other, as you continue to interact with others, don't look on the outside. Maybe this is your next spiritual step. Who is it that knows you? I mean, really knows you. That they can walk up to you and go, how are you doing? Really? And maybe it's time to also find some other people that you know. And not have superficial, surfacey relationships. But dive in deep. Find those accountability partners that you can walk with, so that when you do get in darker times, you know you have a friend that you can reach out to. Maybe your next spiritual step is simply to hear the answer that I kept getting when I kept reading and asking, God, why? God, why? Maybe your next step is to just hear God say, you don't need to know why. You just need to follow. You just need to follow. Let's go ahead and pray. God, again, we just thank you for this day. And God, just to have those two stories side by side, to see two faithful followers going down similar yet totally different paths. God, in the end, we realize you were with both, always. In the midst of whatever chaos was going on in their life, whether it felt great, whether it felt bad, God, you were there. God, help us to know that you're there with us. And God, help us to not have to always know why, but to simply follow. In your name we pray. Amen.